When they called her name, the applause was thunderous, but beneath it, she swears she could hear half the room sighing, disappointed, annoyed, rolling their eyes. Meryl Streep had just won another Oscar, and while the rest of the world watched in awe, celebrating her like a goddess of the screen, something darker was simmering beneath the surface. She's the most decorated actress in Hollywood history, with more Oscar nominations than any actor, living or dead. A living legend, a master of her craft. But behind every award, every teary speech, and every dazzling performance, there's a story you've never been told. Because Meryl didn't rise to the top untouched. She's been attacked, dismissed, envied, and nearly broken. Some of the biggest stars in the world have publicly called her out, accusing her of hoarding roles, being too serious, even suggesting she didn't deserve her fame. Designers have accused her of betrayal. Directors once ignored her. And the love of her life? She watched him die in her arms. But through it all, she never stopped, never crumbled, and never apologized for being excellent. This isn't just the story of a great actress. This is the story of what it costs to be the best, in a world that secretly loves to tear the best down. So how did a girl who thought she'd never be beautiful enough, talented enough, or tough enough, become the most feared and respected woman in Hollywood? Let's start at the beginning, before the spotlight, before the fame, before anyone believed she had a chance. Long before the red carpets and standing ovations, Meryl Streep was just Mary Louise, an awkward kid from Summit, New Jersey, with thick glasses, frizzy hair, and zero belief in herself. Her childhood wasn't a fairy tale. She wasn't the popular girl, she wasn't the standout. She wasn't even sure where she fit in. In school photos, she blends into the background, more observer than participant. She later admitted she didn't think she was special, didn't think she was beautiful, and certainly didn't think she was destined for greatness. She grew up in a household full of contradictions. Her mother, Mary, was a free-spirited artist who believed in magic, music, and chasing dreams. Her father, Harry, was the opposite, a pharmaceutical executive who valued structure, discipline, and results. It was like growing up in two different worlds, one pulling her toward creativity, the other toward stability. Meryl stood in the middle, trying to make sense of it. The outside world wasn't much kinder. At school, she was quiet, shy, and filled with self-doubt. She didn't see herself the way her mother did. "You can be anything," her mom would say over and over. Meryl didn't believe it, not yet. But everything started to change the day she stepped on stage. It started with school plays, low pressure, low stakes. But the moment she took on a character, something inside her clicked. She wasn't Meryl anymore, she was someone else. Someone confident, someone powerful. Acting became her escape, her armor, her superpower. On stage, she wasn't just accepted, she was electric. By age 12, she even tried opera lessons, coached by the well-known Estelle Liebling. Her voice had potential, but even then, something felt off. It was too rigid, too boxed in. Opera wasn't where she belonged. She needed something bigger, freer. She needed to act. She doesn't shrink in the face of doubt, not even her own. And just as she was about to walk away from acting for good, one performance changed everything. It caught the eye of someone important. A door opened. A future began. But she had no idea that her greatest heartbreak and her biggest career breakthrough were coming next. Just as Meryl Streep was climbing out of obscurity, standing on the edge of a promising career, she met someone who would completely reshape her world. John Cazale wasn't a household name, but in the acting world, he was revered. He had starred in just 5 films, and every single one was nominated for Best Picture: The Godfather, Dog Day Afternoon, The Conversation. He was quiet, intense, mysterious. He didn't chase fame, he chased truth. And when Meryl met him while working on a Shakespeare production, it was instant. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't young, but he saw her, not just as an actress, but as a force. He believed in her talent long before Hollywood ever would. To her, he wasn't just a partner, he was a mirror. Someone who could match her depth, her intensity, her hunger for something real. Their love was fast, deep, consuming, but it didn't come with a happy ending. In 1977, John was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. He kept it private. So did she. While most people her age were chasing auditions and agents, Meryl was preparing to say goodbye to the person who meant everything to her. And when his health began to decline, she did the unthinkable. She dropped everything. Walked away from work, moved into the hospital, slept in chairs, fed him, held his hand as his body failed him. She refused to leave, even when studios called, even when producers threatened to move on. Most people didn't know. the public still saw Meryl as this emerging star with quiet confidence and a big future. What they didn't see was a 28-year-old woman fighting silently to keep the love of her life alive. He died in March 1978, and with him, a piece of Meryl disappeared too. But here's the part that stuns people. Just 6 months later, Meryl Streep got married. Not to replace him, not to move on, but because sometimes life throws you a hand you're not ready for, and you grab it anyway. His name was Don Gummer, a sculptor. Quiet, private, the opposite of Hollywood. He was her brother's friend, there to help pack up John's belongings. They talked, then they kept talking. Then something shifted. Some called it a rebound. Others whispered. But what nobody could deny was this. Don would become the one constant in Meryl's chaotic, brilliant life. And their marriage, quietly built, fiercely protected, would last over 40 years. John Cazale's death nearly destroyed her, but it also lit something inside her, a fire that would soon burn through every frame of film she touched. In an industry built on image, Meryl Streep was the anomaly. She wasn't conventionally beautiful. She didn't play the media game. She didn't network at the right parties or drape herself in designer gowns. She came to act, and when she did, everyone shut up and watched. After Yale, she hit the New York stage with everything she had. Her performances weren't glamorous, they were gutting. She had a way of disappearing inside characters that made critics stop mid-review. Directors took notice. Casting agents whispered her name. And then, in 1977, she landed a small role in Julia. It wasn't much, but she made it memorable. Then came The Deer Hunter. The role was emotionally brutal and deeply personal because, while filming it, John Cazale was already dying. The film's producers didn't want to cast him once they learned about his illness. But Meryl fought for him. She told them she wouldn't do the movie without him. They caved. And when the film hit theaters, it became a sensation. Meryl received her first Oscar nomination, and the world finally began to understand what insiders already knew. This wasn't just another actress. This was something else. 1 year later, Kramer vs. Kramer changed everything. It wasn't just a good performance. It was seismic. The role of Joanna, a woman who leaves her husband and child, then returns to fight for custody, was the kind of part most actresses would soften. Make likable, make digestible. Meryl didn't. She made Joanna real. Flawed, angry, lost, and human. Even with limited screen time, she transformed the film. Critics were stunned. The public was divided. But everyone agreed. This was a performance no one could ignore. She won her first Oscar. And just like that, Meryl Streep went from rising star to unstoppable force. But here's what made her different. She didn't chase the fame that came with it. She stayed away from the spotlight. She didn't use her wins to party hop or brand build. She retreated, quietly, to her life with Don, to her children, to her work. Always her work. And that's when the resentment started to creep in. People whispered that she was too serious, too perfect, that she never made mistakes, that she was hogging the best roles. Industry legends began to speak out, some with envy, some with honest frustration. Katharine Hepburn said Meryl was too obsessed with technique. Susan Sarandon joked that every meaningful role for a woman went to Meryl first. And Sharon Stone? She didn't hold back, saying Meryl looked ordinary and that her own beauty was a curse that cost her better roles. It would have crushed most people. But Meryl didn't flinch. She never fired back, never fueled the drama. She let her work do the talking. And her next role would do more than speak. It would scream across cinema history. Because when Meryl took on Sophie's Choice, she didn't just act. She bled. Meryl Streep has delivered dozens of unforgettable performances, but ask anyone in Hollywood and they'll likely agree. Sophie's Choice was the moment she stopped being an actress and became a legend. But what no one talks about is how much that role cost her. The character of Sophie Zawistowski wasn't just difficult, it was emotionally catastrophic. A Polish Holocaust survivor living in post-war Brooklyn, Sophie carried a soul-crushing secret, that in a moment of unthinkable horror, she was forced to choose which of her children would live and which would be taken away forever. For Meryl, this wasn't just another film, it was a transformation. She didn't study the role, she absorbed it. She learned Polish and German to speak Sophie's dialogue with perfect fluency and emotional weight. She studied real accounts of Auschwitz survivors. She altered her voice, her posture, even her energy, transforming into someone hollowed out by guilt, memory, and unspoken grief. And when it came time to film the scene, The gut-wrenching moment where Sophie is forced to make her choice, Meryl refused to rehearse it. She wanted it to be pure, raw, as horrifying as it would be in real life. So when the cameras rolled, what came out of her was not performance. It was a scream ripped from the darkest part of the human soul. Everyone on set froze. Some crew members cried. It was that real. The result? An Oscar for Best Actress, universal acclaim, a performance that would be studied in acting schools for generations. But what the cameras didn't show was what happened after the director yelled cut. Meryl broke down. The emotional toll of that film haunted her long after the credits rolled. She later admitted that she was afraid of losing herself completely, that she had to pull back from ever going that far into a character again. Sophie's choice wasn't just the role that solidified her as the greatest actress of her generation. It was the role that nearly consumed her. A performance so harrowing, even she wasn't sure how to come back from it. And yet, she did. But not by going deeper into tragedy. Instead, she flipped the script completely. After Sophie's choice, Meryl could have coasted. She had nothing left to prove. But coasting was never her style. If anything, the weight of her past roles and the trauma of carrying them pushed her to reinvent herself. In the mid-80s, she returned to the big screen with Out of Africa, starring alongside Robert Redford. The film was sweeping, romantic, and a massive hit. Meryl played Karen Blixen, a fiercely independent Danish woman navigating colonial Kenya. It was elegant and powerful, another Oscar nomination, of course. But more than that, it was a shift. Karen wasn't a victim, she was a survivor. Strong, intellectual, and in control. But just when the public thought they'd figured her out again, Meryl pivoted. Hard. In Silkwood, she played Karen Silkwood, a working-class woman at a nuclear facility who discovers dangerous safety violations and risks everything to expose the truth. It was gritty, unglamorous, and wildly different from the sophisticated women she'd played before. This wasn't a performance about polish, it was about principle. Another Oscar nomination followed, then, out of nowhere, she made them laugh. In Postcards from the Edge, written by Carrie Fisher and based loosely on her own life, Meryl took on the role of a washed-up actress battling addiction and a dysfunctional relationship with her equally famous mother. It was raw, funny, self-aware, and completely unexpected. Critics praised her comedic timing. Audiences couldn't get enough. The industry realized she wasn't just a dramatic powerhouse, she was a comedic assassin too. But she wasn't done breaking her own mold. In 1992, she starred in Death Becomes Her, a bizarre, over-the-top black comedy about vanity, immortality, and revenge. It was pure camp. She played an aging actress who drinks a potion promising eternal youth, only to discover the horrifying cost. It was absurd, brilliant, visually wild, and a cult classic was born. People who had called her too serious were suddenly stunned. Meryl could be hilarious, dark, playful, even ridiculous, and still act circles around anyone else in the room. Each role was a risk, and each one paid off. She wasn't chasing critical approval anymore. She was chasing creative freedom, refusing to be boxed in, refusing to become predictable. That's what made her so dangerous to the Hollywood machine. But with every reinvention came more attention, more awards, more headlines, and behind closed doors, more resentment. Some actresses started to voice it publicly. Some critics began whispering about whether Meryl Streep was too dominant, whether she was taking up all the space, all the roles, all the acclaim. The backlash was brewing. And the next chapter in Meryl's story wouldn't be about who adored her, it would be about who wanted to see her fall. By the early 2000s, Meryl Streep was no longer just a great actress. She was the actress. Her name was synonymous with excellence. If she was cast in a film, the project gained instant credibility. If she gave a performance, it was award-worthy by default. But with that level of dominance came something Meryl had never asked for and could never avoid: resentment. It started as whispers. Then came the interviews. Fellow actors, some legends in their own right, began to question why every major role for a woman seemed to land in Meryl's lap. Katharine Hepburn, a Hollywood icon known for her fiery independence, once said Meryl was too cerebral, too focused on the technical, not enough on instinct. Coming from anyone else, it might have been brushed off. But this was Hepburn. The comment ignited fierce debate. Was Meryl too perfect? Then Susan Sarandon added fuel to the fire. In a candid moment, she said that before any major female-led script got to the table, it passed through Meryl first. If she says no, then we might get a shot. It wasn't a direct attack, it was frustration. An admission that even other Oscar-winning actresses felt overshadowed by the unstoppable force of Streep. But perhaps the most controversial remark came from Sharon Stone. In a scathing comparison, Stone said, "I'm better looking than Meryl Streep. Why don't I have the same roles?" Her implication was clear. Meryl's success wasn't about appearance, it was about how Hollywood perceived her as more relatable, more real. Stone's beauty, she claimed, had held her back. Meryl's every woman charm had pushed her forward. That quote detonated in the press. Some agreed. Others called it bitter and unnecessary. But underneath it all was a deeper truth. Meryl Streep had become a symbol not just of talent, but of opportunity in an industry that offered so few for women. To some, she was the exception that proved the rule. To others, she was a reminder that even success could breed division. Meryl, for her part, never responded publicly. She never took the bait, no drama, no gossip, just silence. And more brilliant performances. But the backlash wasn't limited to actresses. Even in the world of fashion, she faced heat. In 2017, legendary designer Karl Lagerfeld accused her of rejecting a Chanel dress because another designer offered to pay her. He went public, suggesting Meryl had been swayed by money. She fired back immediately, calling it slander and flatly denying ever asking for payment to wear a gown. Lagerfeld eventually apologized, but the story stuck. Even at the top, Meryl was still fair game for controversy. Yet despite the criticism, the backhanded compliments, the passive-aggressive jabs, she never stopped. Because Meryl knew something her critics didn't. When you're at the top, everyone below you wants the throne. Just when the public thought they'd seen every side of her, Meryl Streep returned with a performance that redefined her once again and made her even more feared. It was 2006. Meryl had just turned 57. Most actresses at that age were being pushed into mother or grandmother roles, if they were offered anything at all. But Meryl landed the role of Miranda Priestly in The Devil Wears Prada. Miranda wasn't soft. She wasn't lovable. She wasn't a tragic heroine. She was ruthless, cold, brilliant. A fashion world dictator with a whisper that could make you crumble. And the best part? Meryl didn't play her as a villain. She played her as a woman who had survived 1,000 battles in silence. Her cruelty was calculated. Her power? Absolute. The performance was iconic. Instantly. She turned what could have been a caricature into a complex portrait of female power in a male-dominated industry. Audiences hated Miranda and couldn't stop watching her. Younger viewers who'd never seen Sophie's Choice or Kramer Versus. Kramer suddenly became obsessed. Meryl Streep was now a meme. A reference point. A cultural reset. And the industry took note. Despite being in her late 50s, she was getting lead roles. Box office leads. Something almost unheard of in Hollywood, where youth is worshipped and older women are often discarded. But Meryl flipped the script. Again. From there, she only doubled down on her range. She sang and danced in Mamma Mia. She embodied Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady, winning her 3rd Oscar. She brought laughter and grief in Julie and Julia. And every time someone said she'd finally peaked, she'd deliver another role that shattered expectations. Even after 6 decades, she never played it safe. And every risk she took sent a message to the rest of Hollywood. She wasn't done yet. But behind that calm composure, behind the Oscar speeches and media smiles, there was one unshakable truth that even her critics had to admit. No one worked harder. No one was more prepared. And no one could replace her. For over 5 decades, Meryl Streep has been everything Hollywood claimed to value and everything it secretly feared. She didn't just survive the industry, she bent it to her will. She didn't play by the rules, she rewrote them. She didn't sell her private life for headlines or rely on shock value to stay relevant. She led with skill, discipline, and a level of craft that left even her critics stunned into silence. Behind the record-breaking awards, the genre-defying roles, and the icy elegance of Miranda Priestly, there's something deeper. A woman who refused to shrink, who carried the grief of losing the love of her life, who balanced motherhood with one of the most demanding careers imaginable, who faced envy, insults, and public doubt, and answered everyone with nothing but work. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room. She didn't have to be. She let the silence that followed her performances speak for itself. Meryl Streep's story isn't just about success. It's about endurance, integrity, and what it means to stay true to yourself in a business that constantly tries to reshape you. And maybe that's why, even now, at an age when most actresses are pushed into the shadows, she's still here, still evolving, still impossible to ignore. Because legends don't retire, they outlast the noise.